Hey coders, and welcome to episode 3 of our Python technical interview course. In today's episode, we're just going to be reviewing variables and data types. Alright, so I'm sure you're already familiar with variables. They store data in your program. And to declare a variable in Python, it's extremely straightforward. All you do is type out the variable name and then equals the piece of data that you're trying to store. For instance, if you look on the slide, I have a piece of data, the string David, and I'll assign that to the variable name first name. Now, when you write out variable names or when you name your variables, generally they're going to be in snake case. This is best practices. This is the style guide recommendation. And snake case is basically all of the letters in your variable name are lowercase, and any spaces in your variable name have to be replaced with underscores. Cool, so if we look at data types now, every piece of data that you store or that you work with in your program intrinsically has a type attached to it. And the type of that piece of data determines the operations that can be performed on it. So for instance, if I wanted to subtract 3.14 from the string David, right, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make any sense because a string can't be subtracted, or a float, right, a numeric type can't be subtracted from a string. However, if you wanted to subtract 3.14 from the number 7, that does make sense because the data types are aligned. So there are a lot of different data types in Python: strings, integers, floats, lists, dictionaries, sets. We're going to cover a lot of those in later episodes. But again, data types are really important because they determine what operations can be performed on them. All right, I want to include this slide because it is a big, in all caps, concept. And that is that Python is dynamically typed. So if an interviewer asks you, what does it mean that Python is dynamically typed? This is how you respond. You say, that means that a variable's data type can change within the course of the program, right, from line to line. So that's different from a statically typed language in that if you were to declare a variable in a statically typed language, that variable's data type cannot change throughout the course of the script. So if you look at the little code snippet in the bottom right-hand corner, we see that in Python we can do that. We can say x equals 5, and then in the next line say x equals David. And even though x was originally assigned to the data type of an integer, and then now we're trying to reassign it to a string, that is a-okay with Python because it is dynamically typed. All right, let's jump on in over to the coding demo to take a look at these concepts in a little bit more practical vantage point. You really can't find another programming language more concise than Python. Watch this. I'm about to declare a variable called data and assign it the value of 5. And just like that, I have declared this variable. There's no preceding it with its data type, such as, int data equals 5, or, declaring it as a variable. It's just data equals 5. And if you recall, Python is a dynamically typed language, which means that later down in the code, I can actually change the data type of this variable to something entirely different, like a string. And if we want to go crazy, we could even change it again to something like a Boolean. And all of this is okay with Python because the data types of variables are determined at runtime. That's what it means to be a dynamically typed language. Cool, so this is the standard way of declaring variables. However, if we wanted to be even more concise and we wanted to declare multiple variables on the same line, we could do that. We could say something like x comma y equals 5 comma 6. And what this will do is that it will assign the variable x equal to the value of 5. And it will declare the variable y equal to the value of 6. And if we wanted to declare multiple variables all with the same value, we can do something even more concise. For instance, if I say likes blue equals true, that's fine, but let's say that I also wanted to declare a variable called likes red and assign it to the value of true as well. Well, we could simply just do it like this. We could say likes blue equals likes red equals true. And what this will do is that Python will declare two variables, likes blue and likes red, and assign them both the value of true. So that is some pretty standard ways of declaring variables. Now, if you've probably been noticing, I have been using snake case to declare my variable names, and that is the official recommendation from the Python style guides. Basically, all that means is that all of your letters in your variables have to be lowercase, and if there's any, for instance, spaces, then you need to replace those spaces with underscores. And all of that is just kind of like a best practice, not really enforced by the Python interpreter. However, there are some naming conventions that are enforced by the Python interpreter. For instance, every time you have a variable name, it can only include letters, digits, or an underscore, and or any combination of those three. So they can't include special characters. For instance, if I wanted to say, favorite, at color equals something, that's not going to be allowed because the at symbol is a special character. Another way people get bit is they try to add hyphens. Again, this is not going to work because a hyphen is a special character. It has to be an underscore. Another thing is that if you include numbers, that's totally fine. However, your numbers have to be preceded by a letter or an underscore. So another way of saying that is that you just can't start a variable with a digit. That's not allowed. So you can't say like number 1 favorite color. And then lastly, let me add that back in and then just comment it out. And then lastly, you also can't have variable names equal to keywords in Python. So for instance, the keyword for is reserved for a specific functionality. Also, if is reserved, and is reserved. Just a lot of these keywords are reserved. You can't say like and equals, and or whatever. That's not allowed because this keyword is already reserved. All right, and the last thing that we want to cover before we close out this video is data types. And the thing I want to mention most with this is that Python is a strongly typed language. And what that means is that once you declare a certain piece of data or a certain variable as a certain data type, then Python will never change that data type on you. You'll have to explicitly change it yourself. So let me give you an example to make this a little bit more concrete. Let's say that the variable num1 is equal to integer 1, and then num2 is equal to the character string 1. If I were to add these two variables, then and run this is actually going to error out. And you can see that we're getting a type error, unsupported operand types for plus, int, and string. And what that's basically saying is that we can't add a string to an integer because they're two different types. And also, Python is not going to implicitly convert this string to an integer. Now, something in a weakly typed language like JavaScript, JavaScript would actually do that. It would actually see that, maybe you're just trying to add the number 1 to the integer 1, and so it will implicitly cast this string to an integer so that this line can run. However, Python promises not to do that. If you want to change the data type of this piece of data, you're going to have to do it explicitly. For instance, I'm going to typecast this string into an integer, and if I were to run that, then now we can see that we're getting the result of 2, which is what we wanted. Cool, so there's one thing more I want to mention, and that is how do I determine, for instance, the data type of a specific variable. And the way to do that is to use the function type, the built-in function called type. So now if I were to run this, we can see that the data type of this variable num2 is, and we need to print it out so that we can actually see it on the console. We can see that that type is of data type string. So that is a very handy function. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that video and learned something from it, albeit it maybe was review for you. But if you did like it and are excited for future videos, don't forget to hit the like button and the subscribe button. And I'll see you in one of those future videos. Okay, so we made it to the end of this video, and before moving on to the next one, let's make sure that we can answer these questions confidently. So number 1, what is the difference between a variable and a data type? Number 2, how do you declare a variable in Python and assign a value to it? Number 3, what's the difference between a statically typed and dynamically typed language, which is Python? Question 4, what's the difference between a weakly typed and a strongly typed language? Again, what is Python? And then number 5, how do you check the type of a variable?